Welcome to the Modern Spirituality Show. I'm Ben Decker, and my guest today, of course, in most circles, many circles, really needs no introduction, but let me just tell you, this is someone who's been working in healing and progressive spirituality for 4 decades, which is incredible. And these particular 4 decades have been such a transformational time in that space, due in no small part to you. So thank you for being here, Marianne Williamson.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you. We've been through so many different experiences together. I feel
Yeah.
I feel like I've been able to see you really on the front lines of some of these things that you're teaching about. You teach.
Well, there's a line in the Course in Miracles where it says that people hear you on the level that you speak from. And I don't think whether you're talking about writing or speaking or any other creative expression, I don't think you reach people in a passionate place unless you're speaking from a passionate place. I read a quote once. I'm pretty sure it was Thoreau. And it was something about how if anybody is truly being honest about their life, it's like gazing into a fire. It's interesting. There's a level of authenticity that is the compelling truth. Anytime I hear someone speak, anytime I'm reading a book. And you're right. I have tried to practice what I preach. I've always known that that's when my life works. And sometimes when you were talking about that, not all the time, because you don't want to make it all about you, but sometimes speaking from your own story and your own truth is the greatest way to articulate a message.
I want to just plug the new book right away as soon as possible, The Mystic Jesus. I have it on Kindle here. Do you have the hardcover? You have it, you can show us?
I have it.
There's the hardcover. It's beautiful. I've got it on Kindle, and
Yeah,
also
it's nice, isn't it?
it's a beautiful book. And I remember, you've been in some ways working on this particular book for a few years. I mean, it was something that I heard you had mentioned a few times.
You know what it was? I tell a story towards the beginning of the book about how several years ago, my friend Maria in New York had told me that there was this painting that had been discovered and had only recently been authenticated as an original Leonardo da Vinci. And it was a picture of Jesus called Salvatore Mundi. And it is a picture of Jesus wearing Renaissance robes, quite anachronistic, holding an orb and holding his hands. And I had looked it up on the internet. I had already seen an article about it. And she said it's been bought by a mystery buyer. And right now it's at Christie's in New York and it's on display. Would you like to go see it? I know someone who works there. So I was really excited because I had read about the painting. Anytime they found a new Leonardo or they found a new, obviously it's a big deal, like, wow. And the mystery of who had bought it. So I said, sure. And Christie's wasn't even far from my house. And we went and we're standing in line because it's the end of the viewing. Very shortly thereafter, they were going to be coming to take the painting away and deliver it to whoever had bought it. And so we're just in line, chatting away like you're at a gallery. And then I saw the picture and I had a very strange experience. I don't know, maybe it lasted 5 seconds. Might have lasted a little bit longer. 10, maybe 30 seconds, I don't know. But it was as though in looking at the painting, I was delivered to a piece of information, a piece of wisdom that lay beyond the picture. And I wasn't stoned. It was just regular life. I realize who I'm talking to here. No. There was nothing augmented.
No plant medicines involved.
No. I was just, and I saw 2 words. And I knew that he was those 2 words. And one was tenderness and one was power. And I was being shown that he is infinite tenderness and he is infinite power. Tenderness, like imagine the kisses of a billion tiny babies. Imagine the power to rule the universes. And I was like delivered to that.
Mhm.
And it was shocking to me and amazing to me. And then I was sort of brought back to, the room. And not too long after that, they came and they took the painting away and we left. But I had really been impacted by this experience. So throughout the day, I kept checking the internet because I knew that they had taken the painting and I knew that they were going to reveal who had been the mystery buyer.
Right.
And when I read who it was, I couldn't believe it because the person who bought the painting was the Crown Prince MBS in Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
And we already knew of him as quite the dictatorial figure,
Right.
even worse. And at first I was like, no, there's something so wrong about this. He was apparently starting a kind of Louvre of Saudi Arabia. And
Mhm.
I read, I think that he had paid $450 million for the painting and that it was going to be the centerpiece, just like Mona Lisa is the centerpiece at the Louvre, right?
Wow.
And at first I thought it was so wrong. And then I realized, no, this is the whole point. Who would he rather be with? Who is it most important? Who is among the most important people in the world to get the point of infinite tenderness that is infinite love, that is infinite power? So I was really excited about that painting and I thought it would be a perfect book cover. But
Mm.
part of what the book is about is introducing particularly, I think, to the higher consciousness movement, to the metaphysical community. And also, there's this whole deconstructionist movement within Christianity, just to people who have seen Jesus as kind of like a figure in a musty old glass case in a museum somewhere. And we want to free him from that, liberate the very idea of Jesus from the confines of doctrine and dogma that's just been handed down to us. And I think that's going on. We're living at a time where we're rethinking everything. We're rethinking politics, we're rethinking education, we're rethinking medicine, we're rethinking science, we're rethinking human relationship, we're rethinking sex, sexuality, and of course, we're rethinking religion and spirituality. And I found, and I'm sure that you'd agree, in the higher consciousness community, it's like permitted to discuss Krishna, to discuss Buddha. There are certain figures that we are open to looking at through the lens of their archetypal significance, psychological significance. But Jesus has kind of been a little bit verboten,
Yeah.
But because I'm Jewish, I didn't. It's so funny. I found when I started reading The Course in Miracles that people who had grown up Christian in many cases
Mhm.
had more ambivalence about some of those Christ-centered terms. I didn't have to unlearn anything. I didn't, because I had just been told, we don't read that, darling, we read the other book.
Right.
So, yeah, so that's where that picture, the issue of that picture, which I thought was so amazing. But we're living in a world. It's so interesting because the publisher ultimately gets to decide your book cover. You do have, I think, veto power, but it's not, the author doesn't come in. So they didn't want anything that was so classically Christian. Whereas to me, my mind doesn't go there.
Right.
So that's the
Right. You
story of that
have an
picture.
experience altogether with that. And I love the distinction that you make between this. You acknowledge Jesus as both a historical figure and a living spirit in the present. I love the subtitle of your book. It's The Mystic Jesus, The Mind of Love. I think that's the most beautiful, perfect subtitle. As soon as I saw it, I was like, she fucking does it again, Marianne Williamson.
Well, thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
very much, Ben. I I obviously there was a historical figure of Jesus 2000 years ago. There's nothing in this book which is to show any disrespect or to minimize the significance of his historical journey.
Right.
It's just to say that his historical journey is kind of like the tip of the iceberg,
Mhm.
and that underneath that there are so many more layers of relevance.
Mhm.
St. Augustine said, ever ancient, ever new. So on the metaphysical plane, there is no time or space. So that something that's happening 2000 years ago, this whole time and space thing is part of what we're rethinking. So this book is not, it refers to the Jesus who lived 2,000 years ago, but it's not a Christian book. I'm not a Christian scholar. I'm not a Christian. This book is about the universal aspect of consciousness, which is Jesus, and which is not an exclusive force, but an inclusive force. The Course in Miracles says he is someone who has fully actualized the divine mind. He has fully actualized the mind of the Holy Spirit, where God and man touch. But he's not the only name on that door. And someone can see him as a psychological guide, whether or not you have any desire to recognize this in its relation to theological doctrine or dogma.
I mean, I think that's like one of the most beautiful things that you can do with this type of teaching, especially considering the principles. I was raised Mormon, so raised, very much in a Jesus-centered home, a lot of emphasis on the core teachings, because as you know, Mormon's not one of the old school traditional types of Christianity. If you're raised Mormon, it feels old school because you're raised like it's the whole world that you're in, but it is a 200-year-old organization. It's young, very young. And so there's I think for me, there was a familiarity, and also there was something to A Course in Miracles and the way you presented the teachings of A Course in Miracles, and especially in the context of the mystic Jesus, that felt for me like it made more sense. It brought some of these things into living reality. It was sort of where the rubber meets the road of these teachings, whereas so many of the teachings themselves sort of feel like something that you would teach a child. It's a child's story, sort of like the beginning of it, and something that you build upon or expand upon. And there's more to it, of course, in the spiritual organizations and communities and traditions. There's that notion of the bipolar nature of the exoteric and esoteric. And so the exoteric is like, okay, so watch this story of this person who passes through these various initiations, of the virgin birth, of narrowly escaping slaughter at the hand of Herod, of these various different initiations, Calvary, Golgotha, resurrection, all of the different initiations. There's that part of it. And then there's sort of the immersion, which I feel you do so beautifully. One of your books that you've written that I always reference as one of my favorites is Illuminata, your book of prayers and rites of passage. It's a beautiful way for someone who loves and feels connected to the beauty of ceremonial practice, of prayer, of spiritual tradition, but also feels maybe less resonant with what they were raised in, or traditional terminology.
Well, absolutely, because there's that line from Thomas Jefferson where he said, I hate to butcher Thomas Jefferson, but the paraphrase is something like, I'm not one who thinks we should be changing laws all the time, but the more the human mind expands, the more we should be open, because old ideas can become like a coat that you have outgrown. So the more psychologically astute we are, for instance, when Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. Well, that was 2,000 years before the birth of Sigmund Freud. There was no notion of psychology yet. Now we look at that, oh, my kingdom is not of this world, it's of this world. Mm-hmm. Herod looking, to kill all the Jewish babies. Oh, that's your ego trying to kill all your good ideas. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? Oh, Mary is the feminine within us all. She is the divine feminine. Oh, Joseph is the divine masculine. Mm-hmm. Take her here, take her there, save her life. In other words, navigate the mortal world, the material world, so that this thing can be born. Right. Oh, the crucifixion. Oh, that's all the terrible things the ego tried to do to you and tries to do to you. Oh, the resurrection is the ultimate answer to that, when you remain with God, with consciousness of love in the midst of the crucifixion. So this book explores those psychotherapeutic dynamics, which are the parallel in lived experience. Like you said, the rubber meets the road. So that you see, and I think this is true of all great religious scripture, it's code. It's code. And at any given time, according to the evolution of our own consciousness, we can see these things through more expanded filters. I think one of the ideas that people are rejecting is the idea, nope, the story's closed, the story is interpreted, that's it, closed book, nothing new to be added, and that there's something bad about that.
Right.
And I think the new to be added is the understanding of psychological and emotional and spiritual relevance and practical applicability of these things, the things we go through in our own lives. What is the meaning of Good Friday? The meaning of your own suffering. Jesus wept. Your grief, your sorrow, your pain, your sadness. What is Easter? The celebration of the fact that this too shall pass. Like, wow. But it's one thing even to say that. What the book seeks to do is to explore the different issues related to these stories, and once again, how to apply them, how they become practical, and how we transform our lives. The dark nights, the shepherd looks into the sky, long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. That's always been my favorite line from Christmas Carol. And Oh Holy Night. Well, if the world isn't in sin and error pining right now, I don't know what is.
Right.
And what's the answer? That the soul feels its worth. Because when the soul feels its worth, we understand our power. And that birth of the Son of God within all of us is what's going to transform this world. And that's our only hope for a sustainable future. I mean, when you have the Secretary General of the United Nations, as he did the other day, say that humanity is on an unsustainable course.
Right.
I think that we're beginning to have a glimmer of understanding that rehearsal is over and the grace period is over. When a species displays behavior that is maladaptive to its survival, it will either mutate, it will either evolve, or it will go extinct. And to me, the mutations, the members of the species that display a different way of operating, different operating principle, a different behavioral pattern, are the great religious figures. Right. And I think this evolution, we need to move from Homo sapiens to Homo divinicus now. And that's what Jesus says, and I quote this at the beginning of the book, I'm in a state, he says, I don't have anything you don't have. The difference between us is I don't have anything else. I'm in a state which is only potential in you. That we all have within us the potential to get past those places where we're weak and become strong, where we're harsh and can become gentle, where we blame and judge, we can become forgiving and accepting in every situation that occurs in our lives. The Course says at the beginning, this Course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love. It aims at removing the barriers to the awareness of love's presence. And the Course in Miracles says that each of us has a highly individualized curriculum. We meet who we're supposed to meet. We go where we're supposed to go. That this is the way you are offered by the universe, which is the handwriting of God, the opportunity to both see your issues so that, spiritual detox is like physical detox, got to come up in order to get out. And he says in the Course, Jesus himself says, I cannot take from you what you will not give to me. So real spiritual healing isn't about suppressing our issues or just trying to behaviorally modify. It's about recognizing them and processing them and working through them. And one of the ways you do is by giving them to one who has the power, has been authorized by God to, as he says, my mind joined with your mind can shine away the ego. I mean, what an extraordinary elder brother. He becomes an evolutionary elder brother, an internal teacher. And I think that whether Jesus is the name on someone's door or not, there are many names on the door, the Course says. Right. I always think, even like in a moment like this, Ben, it is reasonable to assume that there are millions of people in this very moment around the world having essentially the same conversation you and I are having. Different languages, different ethnicities, different religious symbols, different religious paths. It could be just a conversation between friends. It could be someone in therapy. It could be someone at a place such as you work. It could be someone within a religious context. It doesn't matter. There's this opening of the eye that I think is coming about in large part because humanity is discerning we need to change. The world as it is simply a reflection of the people we've been. And the world, humanity is going through what each and every one of us go through in our own lives. A situation occurs. Okay, how are you going to play it? You're going to be the same person you were last time? Was that good? Because if it was good, do it even better.
Right.
Or were you limited? Were you selfish? Were you self-referential? Were you lacking in grace? Were you lacking in compassion? Were you thinking about yourself rather than the other person? How'd you do it last time? Were you weak? Well, why don't you this time? You have an opportunity to be strong this time.
Right.
Were you withholding? You have an opportunity to be generous this time. And I think at this point, we are collectively being challenged in much the same way, except collectively, oh, you better take the opportunity to play it differently, because collectively, no matter how much individually we grow, we will all be at the effects of the consequences, such as complete climate breakdown, such as nuclear war, such as whatever horrors could possibly result from our collective refusal to take this next evolutionary leap.
Well, what you're saying is getting right to the core issues. And I think a lot of people are not really used to going to the core issue of something. I think that when you were, I think it was in your 2020 campaign for president that you were on Bill Maher. Bill Maher said, let me tell you what you're the best at of all the candidates. You're the best at, as soon as he said, tell me what you're the best at, my ears perked up. I was like, what does Bill Maher think Marianne's the best at? He said, you're the best at getting to the core of every single issue. The core of every single issue. And I think that what's really interesting about how you teach and sort of the context of the work that you present, it's always getting to the core. I think that's what's beautiful about A Course in Miracles. We perceive that there's the need for many different miracles, but of course there's only the one that ever needs to happen. And then I also love that you always relate the individual to the whole. There's never a sense of separation in the way you present our relationship to the context we find ourselves in, culturally, socially.
Well, anybody in the space of wellness, for instance, just taking the medical model, knows that you can't just treat symptoms. If you don't get to the root cause, you can't just always eradicate or suppress a symptom through external allopathic means. Integrative medicine, the message of that is you have to recognize that until you move into root cause, symptoms can just morph, turn into something else. So you're going to have to deal with more than just the eradication of symptoms. And I think that applies to civilization. Otherwise, look at what's happening in the world today. We're constantly playing whack-a-mole, trying to fix this, trying to fix that. Another symptom rises up, another symptom rises up, and you look and you see the ways in which so many of those symptoms are joined by common root causes, which always has to do with the horrifying results of humanity's cruelty to one another, cruelty to the earth, violence, greed, fear. There's something in ourselves. It's not just the fact that 12,000 children a day on this planet starve, even though there's no lack of food. The deeper question is, who are we as a species that we would tolerate this?
Right.
Given that it's fixable. Given that it's fixable. And so I think at this point, unless we are willing to look at root cause, we will not be able to address the deeper healing that needs to occur, because we won't really understand what the deeper disease is. And what I grapple with is that within the world of personal transformation and the kind of place you're working at now, the kind of work that you do now is an example of this. There has now become a mainstreaming of these issues of personal transformation. but it's a race for time right now.
Yeah.
You know, people say to me sometimes, and this is the question I live with in my heart. Okay, Marianne, you're really good at personal transformational issues. And when I began, right, there was just a few of us. There really was just a tiny few of us.
Right.
But there are no longer just a tiny few of us, which in a way speaks to the success of those few, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that I feel in the realm of personal transformation, I'm grateful that there's still a space for me, but I'm not needed.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? There's you. There's so many. I'm so moved, Ben. You know, yesterday I did a podcast with a young woman, and it was a spiritual podcast. And one of her second or third questions was, what do we do about corporate capture?
Wow.
I was like, wow, this community is really evolving.
Yeah.
But there has also been a trend towards a kind of apolitical posture.
Yep.
Because politics is so corrupt and toxic. No one knows that better than me.
Right.
And I mean it. Mm-hmm. No one knows it better than me. Others know it as much as me, but I've been in the belly of the beast.
Yeah.
But that's like a doctor saying, ooh, this wound is so gross. This gash on your hand is so gross. Let's not look at that. Let's look at your elbow instead. Mm-hmm. You know, they say, well, what you look at expands. Well, do you say that to stage 1 cancer? Stage 1 cancer is more likely to become stage 2, 3, or 4 if you don't look at it. So I think that where we are right now is asking ourselves how these things apply not only to personal transformation, but to collective transformation, global transformation. And we begin to see it's all the same thing. And all that politics is our collective behavioral patterns. So if the work for an individual is to be more loving, the work for nations is to be more loving. If the work for an individual is to atone for our mistakes, the work of a nation is to atone for our mistakes, and so forth and so forth and so forth.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I mean, for me, that's how I felt about, you know, being raised member of the LDS Church. There have been these like huge problematic things in the history of the church that are mostly either hidden or have only come out in the context of like really sort of being forced by the church, forced by pressure outside of the church for the church to have to, you know, reveal or disclose certain kinds of things about race relations. There are different kinds of things in the church. Polygamy is one of the big ones. And the thing for me was, I just was always shocked. I remember the first time I heard that the church was now officially telling a story, a founding story differently than what I was raised with. And the amount of precision and exactness that I was raised with it. My mother's a seminary teacher. She's a gospel doctrine teacher. She's been in the church education system for years. She was in the church education system while I was there. And so I'm getting like direct indoctrination straight from the council, you know. And when I struggled with a lot of different things, and I was like, where's my place? There's so much of this that feels beautiful and true and good, but you know, I have all this dissonance. And it was like the foundation crumbled underneath me when they told the founding story of Joseph Smith, translating the Book of Mormon from this ancient old book. They told it completely differently. And the way they now told it, associated with this seer stone, this special stone that he put in a hat and put his face in the hat, and he channeled the book. I was raised with a completely different story, with object lessons and visuals and renderings of a completely different story. And so my entire faith, my entire relationship to spirituality, I was about 18 when this happened. The foundation was pulled from underneath me. And I found myself just be like, okay, so all religion is complete BS, and everything about that I need a breather from. And that's when I stepped into, you know, facing politics more, you know, involving myself with the Obama campaign first, I actually found you, interestingly enough, through politics. You say that you're not needed now because of how many, other teachers there are. I think that you're needed now more than ever because
Yeah, I hear
of
what you're saying.
because
Yeah,
of the
thank you.
nuance.
I so appreciate that. Thank you. And I think both are true. I think both are true. I think that it's like the intergenerational thing. The older you are, the more you know certain things. And the younger you are, the more you know certain other things.
Right.
The older you are, the more you know about some eternal truths that never change and the circles of eternal return. And the younger you are, the more sense you have of what's happening now. So the intergenerational, not just dialogue, but genuine interface is part of the integration that I think is necessary now. In terms of what you were saying about your own childhood, the Course in Miracles says you are afraid that to even receive this information, because if it's true, then everything you've been taught is untrue. And you're right, it is untrue. And that's shocking and scary. But it also says in the Course in Miracles, it would not be loving to tell you that everything you've been told is wrong and then just leave you there. So it's about deconstructing what is no longer helpful in order to reconstruct. It's all an individuation process, whether it's an individual or a generation or a civilization. What did our parents get right? And I think Mormon, you and I have joked about this. I've said so often my favorite people are ex-Mormons because there's something about what you guys got there. I don't know what it is, but there's a rectitude. And I say this in the most complimentary way. So what did we get that was right? Keep that, stand on that. And what did we get that, no, that one stops now. That one I'm not taking with me. And that one I'm not teaching my kids. And I think that's what's happening to the human race right now. This huge individuation from centuries of mystification. That's what the Renaissance was. The great artists and philosophers of the Renaissance didn't look around and go, I think this is a Renaissance. You think this is a Renaissance? Later, people would go, it was a complete rebirth. And we, in our arrogance, sometimes as Western thinkers, think, okay, well, it's all done now. Like we're the epitome of possibility. And I think we're being humbled enough now to get something we're doing is not right. And that's what happens in our individual lives. That's the bottoming out they talk about in AA. And sometimes it takes that to crack you open and go, okay, if that wasn't working, what can we do that is working? Now, in politics, the problem is there's not one problem that plagues this planet to which there is not a solution. And around which there are not already geniuses throughout the world demonstrating solutions, demonstrating best practices. The problem we have as a species collectively is all of the financial, technological, and political resistance to recreating the world.
It's so interesting that you say that those are the things, because those are all invisible mental forces. Those things.
More and more, Ben, it's interesting that you say that. More and more, they are invisible forces because they have to do with propaganda. They have to do with false narratives. They have to do with disinformation. They have to do with the forces that limit our critical thinking.
Yep.
And that's it right now. That's the awakening right now. In the Course of Miracles, it says in the Bible, it says that Adam fell asleep, and nowhere does it say that he woke up. So we really are talking about a spiritual awakening. And then within that, in the world today, it also means in places where we didn't even know we were sleeping, awaking to the realization that we are more manipulated than we think, that we are, particularly with social media, more vulnerable to the charming lies of officialdom than we might have thought.
Mhm.
So everybody's, I know, and that's what creates the turbulence and the chaos, and the dots aren't connected and people are experiencing. But I think that it's like the good news about the bad news. The bad news is people are like, oh, what's happening? Because we're living simultaneously, one world crumbling, another world struggling to be born.
Mhm.
But when you get, it's like a hologram. When you cut the pieces of the hologram, it's not a little piece of bin, another little piece of bin, another little piece of bin. It's a piece, it's the full bin here, the full bin there, full bin there. And we are all, and this is where the life of Jesus and the journey of Jesus and the stages of his journey, oh my God, that's what we're all going through right now. Are you going to let the you 2.0 emerge, which is the same thing as letting Jesus be born in you? It's like, oh
Right.
my God.
I mean, that's like
And
the most beautiful code to unlock, like just that part, for maybe more so in my psyche because I was raised Mormon, and at the top of the Mormon temples, there's not a cross. It's not about the crucifixion. It's about the second coming. So at the top of every temple is an angel with the trumpet announcing the arrival of the second coming.
that's good stuff, and the Course in Miracles, I mean, that is really good stuff.
Agreed.
Because the trumpet is your voice, and the Course in Miracles says the angels are the thoughts of God. So those thoughts in you, it can be better. You can do it. The universe is on your side. That is and the Course in Miracles says the second coming, and then it puts in parentheses, when he shall be perceived. He never left. He, the Son of God, the perfect version of yourself, the image of you in God's mind, is an undeletable file. It's unalterable, it's indestructible, and it's here. And we're just trained by the thinking of the world to bring down other files. So if I bring down Marianne the selfish, Marianne the angry, Marianne the controlling, Marianne the victim, Marianne the whatever, Marianne the who I could be because I'm programmed to be that way is still in the computer. It's just a matter of training ourselves to bring down the file of who and what we're capable of being on a more consistent basis. And it's like yoga. Just like you have to rebuild your physical muscles, you rebuild your attitudinal muscles. And just as in the physical world, there's gravity, physical gravity that will pull you down unless you are working on keeping those muscles up. There's spiritual and psychological gravity. The thinking of the world, the things going on, will pull you into nihilism and anger and cynicism and judgmentalness and mean-spiritedness, and it's everywhere.
Right.
But we have to, if we want to be not only people who can endure all that, but also be people who can transform all that, we have to do, whether it is, through Course in Miracles, whether it's through Jesus, whether it's through the Kabbalah, whether it's through Sufism, whether it's through psychotherapy, whether it's through work with such things as your ayahuasca programs and so forth. Do something, right?
Right.
And you find, this is like Johnny Appleseed, if we're open to it, books fall at our feet. You'll read podcasts. Somebody told me about a book recently. Just somebody will mention a book. Somebody mentioned a book to me, The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday.
Beautiful.
And it's not written in spiritual language, but it was so helpful to me. Somebody mentions a book. Somebody mentions a spiritual path. Somebody mentions a teacher. If you're open to it, everything we need, it's there.
Right.
Everything we need to solve every problem, according to the metaphysical interpretation of the universe, because the universe is the handwriting of God, is either right in front of you and you're not seeing it, or it's on its way and you're not exercising patience. And it's all, the key to finding it and to seeing it is to see the innocence in the person in front of you, the person you're thinking about. No, it's not just self-love. Jesus didn't come to the world to say, love yourself. Sorry, guys. Came to the world to say, love one another. And once you realize that we are each other, the only way to love ourselves is by loving others. And the only way to love others effectively is when we find a healthy love of self. So whether it's a collective experience or an individual experience, we're not always in control of what happened, but we're always in control of who we choose to be in the space of what is happening. And we will either be taken down by it, we will either fall into the default ego patterns of ourselves and the world, which will only perpetuate the suffering of ourselves and others, or we can become the people who have the capacity not only to endure these times, but to transform these times. And that's what's happening. You know, we have to be, you know, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice, right? But we have to be the benders. And that's what we're all seeking. How can I best serve? How can I best be an agent of rebirth? How can I best be a birth doula for the better version of myself and the better version of the world? And that's what's going on right now. And that is the Renaissance. And whether we live to see all of the material results of these changes or not, it makes all the difference in the world that we can feel while we're here that we're part of the effort. And we will get there. In the Course in Miracles, it says God's will has never not been done. We will become a loving species. Even if this planet, if we so violate the earth that it has to kick us off for 200, 300,000 years, even if, God forbid, there were a global nuclear catastrophe and there were only a few left, at the end, those few will look at each other and go, let's try to do it differently this time. So the Course in Miracles says it's not up to you what you learn. It's merely up to you whether you learn through joy or through pain. We're going to get there. You're going to get there because you're wise enough and responsible enough to go, this is our democracy here. This is the human race here. This is our planet here. No, we got to wake up. No acting like a boy, no acting like a girl. We got to be men. We got to be women. We got to be serious people now. In which case we will download what we need to download. And like you and I were talking about, we're going through the experiences that are preparing us to be the better version of ourselves, whether it was fun or not, right? We'll either do that or, you know, the Course in Miracles says we have free will, but there is a limit beyond which the Son of God cannot miscreate. If you continue to think and behave without love, life stops working. And there is a better way. The Course in Miracles says that salvation, and the only thing to be saved from, by the way, that's an example of those Christian terms. You go, what? The only thing to be saved from is our own fear-based thinking, our own lovelessness, our own insanity. That's the only thing to be saved from, is the thinking that dominates this planet. And the Course in Miracles says salvation begins when we consider the possibility that there might be a better way. So whether it's the people who come down to your center, whether it's somebody's book, whether it's whether it's Jesus or any other path, the Course in Miracles does not speak of a Jesus that claims any kind of monopoly on truth. The meaning of this moment is that we're all yearning, show me, show me, show me. And if we have enough humble prayers in our heart, but that's the meaning of this moment, this yearning that everybody's feeling. And I think that it's so good to remind each other, you're not alone. The fact that you're experiencing internally the chaos of this moment, you're not alone. You know, I wrote something the other day about an experience I had when I was in my early to mid 20s. I had tremendous physical pain, and I was rushed to the hospital. And I was panicked because of the pain. It wasn't just that the pain was so bad, but that it panicked me. I didn't know what was happening to me. And the people around me looked scared. And not long after I got there was a woman doctor, a young woman doctor in the emergency room. And she looked at me. And with her gaze, she poured into me this medicine. And it was the medicine of the information she gave me. She said, listen to me. I know you're in terrible pain. This is colitis. You're having an acute episode of colitis. It is not in any way life-threatening. I know you're scared. I know it hurts, but this is not serious. You will get through this. And the way she told it to me, and she gave me a glass of water, she said, just keep drinking the water. You are not in danger. And when she said that, the pain began to subside. And I realized my panic was literally increasing the physical pain. And as soon as she told me that, and I started drinking the water, and I think that's what we need to say to one another right now. We're going to get through this because we're going to show up for this, not because we're going to deny it's happening. We're going to deny its power over us, power, positive rather than negative denial. And once again, it's two parallel universes. Yes, one's falling apart, another one is struggling to be born. We have to be death doulas and birth doulas so that the world that's crumbling, this change has got to happen. But we are called to be wise and responsible and nonviolent stewards of the change, as well as those who seek in whatever way we can to bring forth a better aspect of ourselves and a better version of the world. And if we look at it that way, we are, number one, less lonely, and number two, we have hope. Faith is not blind. Faith is visionary. And that's that's why knowing, 3 days between the crucifixion and the resurrection, 40 years between slavery of the Israelites at the hands of the Pharaoh and entrance into the promised land, that 3 days symbolizes the time it takes. The tomb time. Yeah, you're in the tomb. Yeah, it's dark in there. And at the end of this, when the women come to reclaim the body of Jesus, they're told he isn't here. He's risen. Oh my God. What that means is the you that was so depressed about all this, the you that was so anxious about all this, the you that was so at the effect of all this, you're going to be a different you. There will be a molecular change. You will become less dense in your body and more filled with light or understanding. The Course in Miracles defines light as understanding. And you see, that's what that means. He is risen and so can we, means he's evolved and so can we. Whoa.
Big time.
Big time. Great. I love that. That's pretty much, what is there to say about big time?
Big time. I mean, it's as good as it gets. I mean, I said it before, I'll say it again. We need you more than ever, Marianne Williamson.
Thank you.
You've been, you were part of that early cluster, or that genius cluster of progressive spirituality.
Very kind of you.
You definitely were. I think anyone who is objectively looking at this movement from any angle, from the deconstruction angle or from a multicultural angle of translating and understanding the core teachings of different traditions, you were very much a popularizer of that movement. And just as in many ways, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? You're one of those giants. I know you stand on the shoulders of many other giants that came before you. And I see that there is something that you created. There's an energy that you uniquely brought to the conversation 4 decades ago, from the very beginning, actually. And I think it's important to say that from the very beginning, you included this, the paralleling of the individual life to the collective. It was baked in the cake from the beginning. When you ran for Congress, District 33, California, when you ran for president 2020 USA, ran for president again this recent cycle, every time there were people who said, why doesn't she stick to her own lane? This is her lane. This has been your lane. And for that reason, so many people like me and many of my friends and many other people who've been inspired by what you've offered and have learned from what you've offered and have been transformed by what you've offered. And then literally that transformation catapults. Gabby Bernstein comes to mind. She definitely is one of the very successful voices that actually directly credits an experience with your presentation of your work that credited all of this this expansion and growth. And I know many other people, myself included, of course, credit you for that and your work for that. And I think that part of why it's so important that you have continued to show up time after time, following your intuition, continuing to practice what you preach, is that you take bold action. You have this extraordinary consistency by maintaining connection to your core teachings, your core study of A Course in Miracles, but you have not stopped your path. You didn't enter that path and say, okay, so come back come back to this one place every single time. You've taken that context out of the cave, so to speak, or out of the church, so to speak, into the world and into all of these different contexts, and you living your life and you saying, okay, I'm going to actually run, you've actually created the blueprint for a society that can function better. The U.S. Department of Peace, the Federal Department of Children and Youth, the U.S. Reparations Council. I had the wonderful privilege of working with you to some extent in the campaigns around those different issues. I was incredibly inspired. I still believe what you created in your political campaigns, people are discovering now, continue to discover, and will continue to discover that all of those are not separate from the spiritual teachings, the universal perennial teachings that you channel, that you share, and they will continue to increase in relevancy to, just like Jesus said, to those with eyes to see and ears to hear.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for your generosity, your encouragement, and your friendship all these years. Thank you so much. Ben, early in my career, like practically right away, because I started lecturing at the beginning of 1983, and I was living in Los Angeles. Very shortly, like within a year, the AIDS crisis burst onto the scene in a big way, much like COVID burst onto the scene. But the difference was with COVID, it was easy to get, but you would probably survive. AIDS was hard to get, but you probably wouldn't survive. So from the beginning of my career as a speaker of A Course in Miracles, we were all confronted with a very real life situation. And all of the work that we did emerged from the fact that we were gathered here to talk about A Course in Miracles, but people were dying all around us. Our lovers, our friends, in some cases, the people who were there. So from the very beginning of my career, life showed me you cannot separate the personal issue of growth into love and just ignore the human suffering all around you. No religious or spiritual tradition gives any of us a pass on addressing the suffering of other sentient beings. So that was always natural to me. The lane of love and spirit is as far as it needs to go to help whoever you could possibly help who is suffering. Mm-hmm. That is the lane. But the society we live in does not care. In fact, it will commend you for applying collective compassion within a nonprofit context, within a charitable context, within anything that has capitalism associated with it. Like you write a book, there's profit to be made, good on you. Mm-hmm. But if you try to touch the levers of power and really change the economic, social, and political dynamics, not only are they not okay with that, but if you get too good at it, they're coming after you. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is the challenge that lay before us.
Well, I mean, as you're saying that I saw that happen before my eyes. Actually here at Rhythmia in Costa Rica on a Tuesday night when you were in the second debates of the 2020 cycle. The second debate was about the time that I officially joined the campaign. And I remember I watched it live. I had done ayahuasca the night before, so
wow.
I was like, no shit, Marianne Williamson on the fucking debate stage. Is this really happening? It was like blowing my mind, and because I as soon as I met you, the first time I met you, you were running for Congress, and you had said something about Goliath, and you paralleled Goliath to capitalism, and you mentioned the smooth stones penetrating his third eye. I was like, who the fuck is Marianne Williamson? What? I was like, I'm obsessed, permanently obsessed. And so during that second debate, I remember I was here at the gym at Rhythmia, because that's where the only TVs are. I'm watching the debate. I'm working with our friend Lauren Selsky on clips. She's getting me clips right away. We're editing them. We're sitting through social media. We're doing all kinds of stuff. We're on it. The energy was incredible. The amount of support and intrigue and interest. Anytime you said something, Twitter exploded with response to what you were saying. And it wasn't that it wasn't serious or anything like that. It was any of the smears and all of the negativity that came later. When it was happening, it was on fire. And I saw it live. I was watching the hashtags. I was active on it. I had my laptop, I had my iPad and my phone. Everything was up. I saw it. I saw the negativity was practically non-existent. And immediately following the debates, I could see all the hustle and bustle, all the media outlets trying to get as many interviews with whoever as possible. Anderson Cooper puts that microphone on you. One of the first things he says is something about you winning the debate. Winning. He said that word. He said that you, Marianne Williamson, that people there, that the buzz present was that you were winning the debate. He said that debate. He said that with a smile on his face, and you were on fire, and the energy was there. And it was probably 12 hours later or 24 hours later that you could see it was like someone sent an email.
That's right. Well, this time, I tell you, this time, they wouldn't, for that reason, for the exact reason that you're saying, this time they wouldn't even allow there to be debates.
Yep.
And from the day I announced and then did an interview the next morning, it was get rid of her. And they peripheralized my voice last time through making fun of me. This time it was complete character assassination and smear and viciousness and infiltration of the campaign even. It's yeah. And that's what, Herod's out to kill those little babies,
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I don't come out of the experience feeling we will not penetrate the veil. We
Mhm.
will. What role I have personally, not only can I not know, but doesn't matter.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter who the person is. It doesn't matter if, as you said, I help lay the ground. So in the earlier stages of things, I opened the field and I walked into it. Maybe this time my destiny is just to open the field and somebody else will walk into it. We can't be attached to that. That's not what ultimately matters. It is interesting though, because when Return to Love came out, Oprah Winfrey opened the door. And I had no correlative to that in politics.
Mhm.
And also the difference between writing a book and running for president. When you write a book, there's no one out there highly paid to do whatever they can on any given day to fuck you up.
Right.
Right. With politics, it's a gangster world. But I don't
It's,
say that the way people use the word now, like it's something good.
mhm.
But even that's just making all of us, where could I have been more savvy? Where could I have been more sophisticated? Where could I have been more hip to what happened? The Course in Miracles says you have to take 100% responsibility for your life experience. And if you don't, then the price you pay is you'll never be able to change it. So even if 90% of it was what other people did to you, what was the 10% of you that made you vulnerable to it? Even if somebody told a terrible lie about you, what little bitty part of it was true? Where did you fail to create the force field that could take it on and transmute it?
Mhm.
So, we're all going through these things in our own lives, whether it's played out on a big stage or played out just in our own lives, or even the way we interpret what somebody else went through on a big stage, you
Mhm.
know? Um,
You've taught me
but
so much, watching you through all of that. You've taught me so much. I remember, there are things that the public doesn't know, that the world hasn't fully acknowledged or seen, that I was able to see by being part of that process with you.
well, if you had been this time, Ben, we'll sit down sometime and have a
Mhm.
long conversation.
Mhm.
Uh, and there are things which probably the American people should know about how this situation operates.
Yeah.
But number one, I can't be the one to articulate those things until I'm completely emotionally cleared of my own stuff around it.
Mhm.
And number two, until it's truly the appropriate time.
Right.
And right now, we have right now there's something bigger than me, bigger than my situation, bigger than any of us, and that's the fate of the country itself that's in play with the election that's coming up. All things in due time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely will keep wearing your hoodie and sharing the gospel according to Marianne Williamson. To quote the New York Times, that was the headline of one of my favorite articles we ever had about you, the gospel according to Marianne Williamson. Thank you so much for this conversation, for all that you're doing. Thank you so much for the Mystic Jesus. I know for a few years you had mentioned that this book was coming, and it's been amazing. I wrote a book, Meditations on Christ, and a friend of mine who I bought Mystic Jesus for, I bought I think like 12 copies when it first came out, sent it
Thank
to.
you.
Yeah, absolutely. So beautiful. It was so easy, and I was so happy to do that. And one of my friends said, this is like a beautiful companion to
Oh,
meditation.
thank you.
And I
Thank
was like,
you.
I just love your work. I love what you do. You're an amazing artist. You're an amazing creator. You have a beautiful mind. You have an incredible heart. You are such a generous person with your energy and with your time. And I just will always sing your praises and will always be so grateful for you. And thank you again for this.
Well, I will always be so grateful for you and to know people over time, to bear witness, as I think you and I have both borne witness to each other's journey and process. And more than anything, thank you for your kindness. So thank you. I love you, Ben. Thank you. It was lovely talking to you.
I love you too. Okay, more soon.